Your special person is an animal in human disguise. Last night they caught red-handed worth a homeless while having. My beloved child. What happened last night has left people looking at your special person differently, because they were caught red-handed with someone who had nowhere to call home, and what witnesses thought they were seeing was only the surface of something much stranger. For weeks, people had noticed a side of this person that seemed almost impossible to explain. Calm one moment. Restless the next. Disappearing without warning, returning late, and refusing to explain where they had been. Someone even joked that they were like an animal hiding beneath a human face, driven by instincts nobody around them understood. But last night, someone finally followed them. And when your special person turned down a nearly empty street and approached a homeless stranger sitting alone beneath a dim light, the person watching from a distance immediately assumed the worst. Then something happened that changed the entire meaning of that secret meeting. Your special person crouched beside the stranger and quietly handed them something wrapped inside an old cloth. It wasn't what anyone expected. Inside were food, warm clothing, a small envelope, and something far more personal, a photograph that made the homeless stranger freeze. Their hands began trembling. Your special person looked around nervously, unaware that someone was watching every movement. Then the stranger said a name. Your name. That was the moment everything became unsettling. Why would someone your special person had supposedly never met know anything about you? Don't skip, because the answer begins with something your special person has hidden for a long time. They weren't there because of romance, betrayal, or some reckless secret. They had been returning to this same person repeatedly because the stranger knew something about their past, and apparently, something about you. But before the watcher could hear more, your special person pulled another object from their pocket. It was a folded piece of paper, worn along the edges as though it had been opened dozens of times. Your special person didn't hand it over immediately. Instead, they stared at it, hesitated, and whispered something that made the stranger suddenly stand. The watcher couldn't hear every word, but one sentence was unmistakable: "They can never know why I did this." Then your special person finally gave the letter away. The stranger read only the first few lines before looking directly at them and asking, "How much longer are you going to hide this from them?" Your special person had no answer. Their strange behavior, those unexplained disappearances, even the almost animal-like fear whenever certain questions were asked, it suddenly seemed connected to this one letter. Stay till the end, because what was written inside wasn't merely about your special person's past. The final line contained your name beside a date, and when the stranger saw that date, they asked one question that made your special person go completely silent: "So you still haven't told them what happened that night?" For several seconds, your special person couldn't even look at the stranger. That silence said more than an explanation ever could. Finally, they admitted that every time they tried to tell you what happened that night, fear stopped them. Not fear of being exposed as some terrible person, but fear that once you understood the truth, you would never see them the same way again. The stranger unfolded the letter once more and pointed to the date beside your name. "You came here because you knew this day was getting closer," they said. Your special person nodded. Then came another revelation. That homeless stranger wasn't random at all. Years earlier, when your special person was going through one of the darkest periods of their life, this was the person who witnessed a decision that changed everything. And somehow, that decision eventually became connected to you. The person secretly watching them moved closer, desperate to hear what would come next. That was when your special person finally explained those strange disappearances. They had been bringing food, clothing, and money to this stranger because they believed they owed them something that could never truly be repaid. The wild, almost animal-like behavior people had noticed wasn't cruelty. It was protectiveness mixed with panic, an instinct to guard a secret whenever anyone came too close. But there was still one disturbing question. Why was your name inside that old letter? The stranger asked exactly that. Your special person took the photograph back, turned it over, and revealed several handwritten words on the reverse. The watcher couldn't read them from a distance, but the stranger clearly could. Their expression changed instantly. So this is really about them, they whispered. Your special person answered, it always was. Then the stranger revealed something your special person clearly wasn't prepared to hear. They had kept another piece of evidence from that night. Something your special person believed had disappeared forever. Don't skip. Because when the stranger reached into an old bag and pulled out a small sealed envelope, your special person actually stepped backward. Written across the front was your name. Not a nickname. Not an initial. Your name. The stranger refused to hand it over immediately. Instead, they said, you have protected this secret long enough. Now they deserve to know why you made that choice. Your special person stared at the envelope as if opening it could destroy the life they had carefully built. But the biggest shock came seconds later, when the stranger revealed who had originally written what was inside, and it wasn't your special person. The name of the person who wrote that message changed the entire atmosphere. Your special person recognized it immediately, and their face went pale. The stranger explained that the envelope had been entrusted to them years ago with one strict instruction: it could only be opened when your special person was finally ready to stop running from the truth. Suddenly, those late-night disappearances made sense in a different way. Your special person hadn't been hiding because they enjoyed deception. They had been returning to the one witness who remembered who they were before fear hardened them. The stranger looked directly at them and said, "You keep acting like survival is the same thing as living." Those words landed hard. Because beneath that fierce, almost animal-like instinct to protect everything they cared about was someone terrified of losing you. But there was another problem. The stranger still wouldn't surrender the envelope. First, they demanded one answer: why had your special person waited so long? After a painful silence, your special person admitted something unexpected. They had almost told you several times. A message had been typed and deleted. A call had been started and ended before it connected. Once, they even carried the letter while hoping to meet you, only to turn around at the last moment. I thought knowing would hurt them more than silence, they confessed. The stranger shook their head. No. You were protecting yourself from their reaction. That distinction seemed to break through every defense your special person had built. For the first time that night, they stopped making excuses. And then they asked for the envelope again. This time, the stranger handed it over. Your special person opened it carefully, expecting a long confession, but inside were only 2 pages and an old photograph. The first page described the night everything changed. The second contained a message meant specifically for you. Your special person read it once, then again, their hands tightening around the paper. Something huge was waiting in those final lines, because whatever they discovered made them immediately ask, "Did you know this all along?" The stranger nodded. Then they pointed toward the photograph and told your special person to look carefully at the person standing in the background. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then recognition hit. Your special person whispered a name they hadn't spoken in years. And suddenly, the reason this homeless stranger knew about you was no longer the biggest mystery, because the person hidden in that photograph was someone connected to both of you. Your special person stared at that faded photograph until their hands began to shake. The face in the background belonged to someone they had believed was completely removed from this story, someone who had quietly influenced events without either of you realizing it. The stranger explained that on the night the photograph was taken, this person had overheard a conversation about you. Not gossip. Not some passing remark. It was a conversation about a promise your special person had made when their life was falling apart. They had promised that if they ever found their way back to you, they would arrive without dragging their old chaos into your life. That promise became an obsession. It explained why they could seem fiercely protective one moment and strangely distant the next. They weren't hiding another relationship. They were hiding the unfinished parts of themselves. Then the stranger revealed why your special person had been caught there last night. The meeting had been planned because the stranger was preparing to leave the area, possibly for good, and there would be no second opportunity to recover the remaining truth. "That's why I called you," the stranger said. "I couldn't take this with me." From inside the bag came a small notebook wrapped carefully in cloth. Your special person recognized it instantly. Years ago, they had written down thoughts they were too afraid to say aloud, including the real reason they kept pushing you away whenever their feelings became serious. Don't skip, because one entry carried a date your special person remembered immediately. It was the same date written beside your name in the letter. And beneath it was a sentence they had apparently forgotten writing. The sentence was simple: "If they ever learn what I sacrificed, I don't want them to feel they owe me love." Your special person closed their eyes. Suddenly, their silence had a completely different meaning. They hadn't wanted you trapped by gratitude. They wanted whatever existed between you to be chosen freely. But the stranger turned several pages and stopped at an entry written later. "This is the part you've been avoiding," they said. Your special person read it, and their expression changed again. Apparently, after making that sacrifice, they discovered information that made them question everything they believed about your separation. Someone had deliberately allowed both of you to misunderstand what happened. And when your special person asked who had done it, the stranger pointed back toward the mysterious figure in the photograph and quietly said, "You already know them. What you don't know is why they wanted the two of you apart." Your special person didn't answer immediately, because the moment that motive became clear, years of confusing memories began rearranging themselves. Messages that seemed strangely timed. Conversations that reached them slightly altered. Moments when they believed you had chosen distance, while you may have been receiving an entirely different version of events. The person in that photograph hadn't controlled everything, but according to the stranger, they had interfered at one crucial moment. They believed separating you was somehow the safer choice. And your special person, already wounded and suspicious, accepted what they were told without confronting you directly. That was the painful truth behind their almost animal-like defensiveness. Once they believed something threatened the person they cared about, instinct took over. They withdrew, guarded the truth, and tried to carry the consequences alone. But the notebook contained something even your special person didn't remember. Tucked between 2 pages was a receipt attached to a handwritten note. The stranger told them to check the date. It came from the exact night everything between you began changing, and beside the date were 3 words: give them time. Your special person recognized the handwriting. Suddenly, they realized someone had persuaded them that staying away from you was an act of protection. You believed them because you were scared, the stranger said. But they never told you the whole story. Then came the detail that made your special person look up sharply. The stranger had personally heard that same individual admit, months later, that they regretted interfering. They had wanted to correct the misunderstanding, but by then, pride, silence, and distance had already done their damage. Your special person stood there gripping the notebook, no longer interested in protecting the past. Something had shifted. They asked for every remaining page, every photograph, every detail the stranger remembered. And this time, there was no hesitation in their voice. Stay till the end, because their next decision wasn't about hiding anything anymore. They said they were going to find you and tell you everything, even if the truth changed how you saw them forever. But before they could leave, the stranger stopped them. There's one more thing you need to see before you go. From the deepest pocket of that worn bag came a second photograph, newer than the first. Your special person studied it for several seconds before whispering, "When was this taken?" The stranger gave them the date, and your special person suddenly realized the person who once tried to keep you apart had recently returned. That date was only days old, and your special person immediately understood why the stranger had insisted on meeting last night. The person from the past hadn't simply returned, they had been asking questions about you. Nothing threatening, nothing dangerous, but enough to reopen a story everyone assumed was finished. According to the stranger, they wanted to correct what they had done years earlier. They had finally admitted that their interference wasn't driven by hatred. They genuinely believed your special person was too unstable, too guarded, too driven by raw emotion to give you the peace you deserved. So they stepped between you, convinced they were protecting you both. But time had forced them to recognize something uncomfortable. By trying to decide what was best for 2 other people, they had created the very heartbreak they hoped to prevent. Your special person looked back at the first photograph, and suddenly their reputation for being almost animal-like took on another meaning. People had seen the intensity. The stubborn loyalty. The way they could disappear into silence whenever emotions became overwhelming. But nobody saw the private battle underneath. They had spent years believing distance was proof of love, when sometimes distance was simply fear wearing a noble disguise. The homeless stranger had understood that better than anyone because they had watched your special person at their lowest point, long before anyone else knew what they were carrying. You keep protecting them from truths they never asked you to hide, the stranger said. That sentence stopped your special person cold. Then they asked the question they had avoided all night. What exactly has that person been asking about them? The stranger hesitated before answering. They had been asking whether you ever learned what truly happened, whether your special person had ever confessed why they disappeared, and most importantly, whether there was still time to repair the misunderstanding. Then came one final detail. The returning person had left behind a message specifically for your special person, and it contained an apology meant for you as well. Don't skip, because your special person didn't react with anger when they heard this. They reacted with urgency. They gathered the photographs, closed the notebook, and said, "Then tonight, the hiding ends." But just as they turned to leave, the stranger called them back and revealed the one thing they had deliberately saved until last. There was another witness to what happened years ago, someone your special person never knew was there, and that witness had already tried to reach you. Your special person stopped halfway down the sidewalk. Of everything revealed that night, this was the detail they hadn't prepared for. The second witness hadn't been a stranger at all. It was someone who had quietly known pieces of both sides of the story and had tried, more than once, to prevent the misunderstanding from becoming permanent. But every attempt came at the wrong moment. One message never reached its destination. Another was dismissed because emotions were already running too high. And eventually, the witness stopped interfering, believing the truth had to come from your special person directly. Now that person had tried reaching you again. Your special person suddenly understood that they were running out of excuses. The past wasn't chasing them anymore. It was giving them one final opportunity to stop hiding. They looked down at everything in their hands, the photographs, the notebook, the old letter, and finally understood what being caught red-handed had truly exposed. From a distance, the scene with a homeless stranger could have looked suspicious. But the reality was far more human. Your special person had been secretly returning to someone who had once helped them survive an impossible chapter, repaying kindness while protecting a truth they couldn't bring themselves to face. Their fierce behavior had earned them that strange comparison to an animal in human disguise, but underneath the intensity wasn't some monstrous secret. It was loyalty pushed too far, fear disguised as protection, and a person who had spent years carrying emotions without knowing how to speak them. Last night forced all of that into the open. Before leaving, your special person made one final decision. They would no longer let another person deliver their truth for them. No more disappearing. No more half-explanations. No more allowing old misunderstandings to decide what happens next. They thanked the stranger, promised they wouldn't forget what had been done for them, and carefully placed the letter inside their coat. Then they walked away with one destination in mind: you. Whatever happens after that conversation cannot be guaranteed, because real feelings don't come with guaranteed endings. But one thing has changed completely. Your special person is finally willing to let you hear the story from their own mouth and decide for yourself what it means. And when they reach you, the first thing they intend to place in your hands is that sealed letter, because the final message inside explains what they sacrificed, why they vanished, and the truth they were most afraid you would discover.